ExTrans people who have detransitioned or in the process of doing so, why? It's very complex, but the biggest factor why I started transitioning in the first place is that heteronormativity was forced on me so aggressively as a kid that I genuinely believed the only way I could fit into society was as a woman. As a man I was too soft, bad, empathetic, bad, and gay, very bad. Because of my soft face and voice I also didn't need to change anything except grow out my hair to perfectly pass as a girl, so transitioning seemed like destiny to me. Started transitioning as soon as I left high school. After a year I started taking hormones and the body changes weirded me the F out. I was unsure of my decision and it gave me anxiety attacks every day. I paused the transition for a bit and then decided to give living as a man one last shot. But this time as my own version of a man and according to my own beliefs instead of what I've been taught by society. It worked and never looked back. That was a decade ago. Edit. One thing I would add is that even though I detransitioned rather quickly, I don't regret trying. If I hadn't tried it, it would have always been a big what if? question in my life, and I learned a lot from it. Thank you for all the wonderful messages, I read them all and they made me so happy. The number of negative comments based on semantics is crazy. Can't we assume a question is well intentioned these days? If we attack everyone who is uninformed on a topic you are close to, how do you hope to gain support and acceptance? It seems really counterproductive. Long story short, I realized I didn't need to go all in to be comfortable with myself. Plus, the crippling self-loathing I had over not looking enough like a cis girl was way worse than my dysphoria was beforehand. In the end I settled to just do whatever the duck felt right and decided to slap the non-binary label on myself, demiboy if you want to get specific, and call it a day. Would I like to magically be born again as a cis girl? Yeah, but that's not how the world works, so I picked the option that in my situation led to the best outcome, and I'm now truly happy. Hell, I don't need therapy for my depression anymore, and in just 2 months I'll be off my meds for it, which is something I never imagined possible. While this might not be the best option for most trans people, it was for me. Okay, Swa was Saeed when I was around 10 years old, so in my mind I thought that if I were a boy, it wouldn't have happened, which I know it's not the case. It can happen to anyone, but I was just a child. Fast forward to 13 years old me, I was sure I was a trans boy, 100%. I came out and for 3 years I lived as Cole. I didn't start hormones, but I had socially transitioned. There were times when I was doubting myself. I wasn't so sure, but I couldn't understand why. This part happened again around 16 and it hit me, so I went to my therapist and just told her everything. I spoke to my family and friends. Now I'm almost 19 years old and still healing. I hate when people still call me Cole, but hey, I can't do much about it. Compassion, stranger. I had a similar journey in that I experienced the same as a child, but I'm sure of my identity as a trans man. There were times I doubted though, when I was much younger, in my late teens and early 20s. This is such a difficult experience to live with. I hope no one is giving you grief for the journey you took. It is totally understandable for a girl to think they would have been safer if they were born a boy. Sounds like you've been through a lot. May the days ahead be brighter than the ones behind you. I'm so sorry you had to live through something similar. I'm sending you many hugs. Fortunately no one is giving me grief now. It was tough at the start, but now it's okay. So, I'm a bit of a weird case. I transitioned because I was a fab, but I'm actually intersex. My chromosomes are XY. I supported my community, but never identified as trans even though I checked the boxes technically. I was given a lot of misinformation by doctors and my family before I found out. I'm a scientist and ran my own genome as practice, then lo and behold, a Y chromosome. I have a lot of very deep regret and pain about having made choices without the full information, because how can I truly consent? I made the best decisions possible at the time, but ultimately I wasn't allowed to make educated choices about my own body. I've since accepted my androgyny and identify less with the binary, embracing my intersex reality. So while I don't and never have identified as female, I did detransition in a sense. I know a few trans people who did detransition, though it was solely due to their families threatening to disown them if they didn't continue living as the gender the family wanted them to. Edit. Check my reply below for info on what a fab means and what intersex is. https www.reddit.com AskReddit comments Webex trans people wo have detransitioned Orinthieks 51a. I convinced myself I wasn't trans from a mixture of not wanting to put up with all the bullshit and misinformation about how effective transitioning could be. About a decade later I finally came out and finally started medically transitioning when the dysphoria got too bad for me to live in denial anymore. It's worth keeping in mind that the majority of people who detransition do so for similar reasons, and a lot of trans people over the age of 35 are retransitioners, who started over when dysphoria got too bad and/or they ended up in a better position to deal with potentially losing friends and family. They're even the majority of the trans people I know over that age. I am not trans, but I have known someone who was a MAB. Transitioned socially in terms of gender expression and began the process of accessing therapy to be allowed hormones. They got a year in, and decided they were non-binary rather than a trans woman. That process was really important and highlighted that when we do away with binary gender, far more people would find a place for themselves as they are. Edit: the fact this post has garnered so much anger is really interesting. Why are people so threatened by gender differences or challenges to this as a norm? What difference does it actually make to your life? I started HRT to transition from MTF in my mid-30s. I was on it for about a year and a half, almost 2. My experience was great. I had a lot of love and support from my friends and family, and I was enjoying all the changes. Then the pandemic happened and my provider team closed and left the state. I had to leave the state as well, and find employment somewhere else. I started a new job, a new healthcare plan, and I had been off of HRT inadvertently for 6 months by the time everything normalized in my life. I started to dream as male again. I realized I wasn't as hormonal and sensitive. When we started working in person again last year, I was presenting as a male again. My new coworkers have only known me this way, and it was admittedly easier than having to explain transitioning a dozen or so different times to different coworkers. Also, my family is still just as supportive. I don't know if I'll retransition or not. I started transitioning when I was 14 and it was a quick and content process, but I was going through a lot mentally. From 14 to 18 no one could convince me I wasn't a man or that I shouldn't continue my transition. I started testosterone at 18, but less than a year into it I started having doubts and stopped. I am 19 now and I've been experimenting with more feminine things. I've stopped binding and bought a wig and a skirt and some makeup and changed my name to something more gender neutral, and I have no idea why my doubts are more around the fact that I came out during a time where my mother had just kicked me out for dating a trans man, and I was in a really abusive predator relationship with a 22-yo at 14, and he was telling me I was a man and that I was doing the right thing, which caused me to make my whole life and personality completely masculine, and from that time until 18 I was just floating with it, and now that I live on my own and have my shit semi-together I have doubts that I never gave myself a chance to embrace feminine aspects of myself from the beginning of puberty to the near end. So I guess my detransition is a reset to the gender crisis to make sure. You were abused by a pedophile. I'm sorry your mother abandoned you at that time. Teenagers are so vulnerable. I hope you can heal and figure everything out. Transitioned at 45 in 2008. Knew in a year or thereabouts I had made a mistake, but by then everyone knew the new name, pronouns, and I had 2 surgery and a full beard. I figured I was stuck. I also had heard laser hair removal was out of my financial range and painful. I went off male hormones and on estrogen, complete husto long done, 6 months ago. Tried laser. It was not expensive but was excruciating. It is mostly done on face, and I figure I will have to shave forever. Looking back, I grew up with my mother constantly saying I walked like a man, dressed like one sometimes, I may as well be a man. Tried carrying purse in high school. People actually laugh, look at Butch here with a purse. I was depressed and alone, and I found a meeting for people thinking about transitioning. Once there, I felt pressured to see it through to be FTM. Never really happy that way. It was so easy to get hormones and surgery. I had a fight to get on estrogen, which is just baffling. For me, transitioning was a combination of family and peer pressure and chronic depression. While others need to do it, I never should have. People, be careful what you comment to your kids. It really stuck with me and has taken me literal decades to get over. Also, once off testosterone and on estrogen, my blood pressure and resting pulse dropped out of dangerous range for the first time since I had started T in 2008. Cheers. Reading this thread I see 2 things in common with every story. Mental health and societal expectations. These are both things that world still does not put enough solutions into. A lot of these peoples could have gone through life without having to start transition to realize they just had mental issues. The world needs to overcome these obstacles. I just want to pop in to say thank you to everyone sharing so honestly. This isn't talked about enough, and I think it's so important, especially for young people to see.